Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane and a daily wrap-up show on UATV, doing our best in explaining complex things in simple terms. For example, what does it take to have a cherry on top of the cake when there is no cake? Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar reported that tough, heavy fighting is raging in eastern Ukraine as Russia masses its forces in a desperate bid to capture just about any settlement for propaganda purposes. It's very difficult in Soledar, Maliar said in Telegram Post. They, meaning Russian troops, concentrated considerable efforts there in order to reach the borders of Donetsk Oblast. Maliar's statement comes a few days after Russian propagandistic reports that Russian forces had allegedly broken the Ukrainian defense in Soledar and that fighting raged in the town. Sergei Cherevati, a spokesman for Ukraine's eastern group of forces, on January 7th, denied Russia's earlier report that it had captured Soledar, saying that Ukraine still controls the town despite the continuing heavy, bloody battles on the ground. In a Telegram post, Yevgeny Prigozhin, founder of the Kremlin-controlled mercenary Wagner Group, fighting alongside the Russian military in eastern Ukraine, said that capturing Soledar in Bakhmut is vital since they have an underground network where troops and tanks could be stored. The cherry on the cake is the system of Soledar and Bakhmut mines, which is actually a network of underground cities, Prigozhin said on January 7th. It not only has the ability to hold a big group of people at a depth of 80-100 meters, but tanks and infantry fighting vehicles can also move about. A cherry on the cake? Okay, but why now? Let us explain to you why. Because of Makeyevka. Because 400 Russians were wiped out with one precise HIMARS hit, tracked on their smart, or rather said stupid phones. And now, since Putin, as a proper enraged infantile elderly Tsar, is pissed off. No cake? What do you mean, no cake? I already got myself tuned for the cherry on the top of it. That cherry-flavored revenge is more important than anything for him. Russian lives, country image, future. Trillions of dollars of expenses for this war. Putin's war on Ukraine is a revenge on us Ukrainians. For Ukraine going to United Nations, Europe, NATO in particular, and towards normal civilization, and not Putin's rotten sovereign empire turned out to be a colossus with a feet of clay in general. Putin is ready for anything. To return to what the world once thought he is, a strategic genius when he started this war. But it was us, usual plumbers, bus drivers, office managers, bankers, lawyers and journalists, a Ukrainian nation who turned itself into an army at times of war and proved he's not. It was Zelensky who rejected the ride from Americans and demanded weapons for us. And it is today clear to the world what is going on in Ukraine.
A few weeks ago, we stated that we do not expect the hostilities to stop in the winter, so it happened. Moreover, in some areas, they have become even more violent, especially in the Donbas. Therefore, we want to do everything so that the Ukrainians are well equipped and prepared for the hostilities that they will have to conduct in the next couple of months. John Kirby, coordinator for strategic communication of the National Security Council of the United States.
We are talking about American and German armored infantry vehicles Bradley and Marder that will help Ukraine in the successful conduct of the spring campaign against Russian troops. The White House said in a statement that National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and diplomatic advisor of the Prime Minister of Italy, Francesco Tallo, during a telephone conversation on January 5th, confirmed their readiness to provide Ukraine with assistance, including support for Ukraine's energy stability, as well as military equipment necessary to protect sovereignty and democracy of Ukraine. The Russian spring envisioned by Putin is clearly not going as he has hoped. That is why things are now so violent in Bakhmut and Soledar and Kramatorsk, all the Donbas region. Moreover, in anticipation of a very likely spring offensive by the armed forces of Ukraine, the United States and Germany will send modern armored infantry vehicles, IFVs, to Ukraine, including those 50 Bradleys, often called tank destroyers. This will help us to transfer troops to the front line and build up forces against the Russian aggressors. Italy is also about to provide Ukraine with a new package of military assistance. Air defense systems of a joint French-Italian production is in discussion.
Sixth package of military aid is still under discussion. We are discussing with the French how to improve the package in terms of sending air defense systems that are based on the joint development of Rome and Paris. Antonio Tajani, Italian foreign minister, in an interview with Corriere della Sera.
Obviously, Zelensky and his office are doing a great job at, as New York Times puts it, a strategy of wooing and pressuring allies. We have our cake baking all right, and here goes our cherry on the top of it. Summit. NATO summit that is scheduled for July 11th, 12th in Vilnius. As Alliance Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg previously stated, the meeting in Vilnius will provide NATO heads of state and government with the opportunity to agree on further steps on strengthen our deterrence and defense and to consider the issue of significant increase in defense investment, as well as to continue our support for Ukraine. Just listen to this. The worldwide rhetoric is changing. Mind that defense investment? There are no defense expenses anymore. In the world, it is all investment now. Investment that pays off when you need it most. In USSR and Russia, it always pissed collective Putins off.
Americans strongly recommend to their younger brothers. Was the impact of American propaganda?
The plebeians themselves can act as the American master needs.
That collective West which today encourages the marionette Kyiv regime.
They call us the marionettes of West. They call us the marionettes of the West. On the orders of their own Führer, the hordes of Russians go to kill and die in a foreign country. Yet we, the Ukrainians, are the marionettes. Russians turn the cities of Ukraine into mass graveyards and the future of their own country into ashes. Yet we are the puppets of the West. Russians celebrate Christmas while their army fires missiles at us during their own proposed truce, yet we are the marionettes. The Russians came to Ukraine with arms in their hands to liberate Ukraine from Ukraine, yet we are the marionettes again. You know, maybe we were the marionettes once, 11 months ago. But today, we, the people of Ukraine, have exposed Putin as a plotting and unimaginative thinker who miscalculated enormously. Since then, Putin was forced, resorting to multiple ponderous, unthinking offensives that have secured minimal gains at a very high cost. The Russian army, wildly overrated before the war by military analysts who hailed it as one of the most fast-moving, technologically sophisticated and powerful in the world, turns out to be profoundly flawed. With ever-changing carousels of generals in charge, it has shown itself to be inflexible, uncreative, and unable to learn. So here's the cherry on the top of a bitter fact for Putin's Russia. More weaponry is coming to Ukraine. That alone proves we are no marionettes, as no one ever weaponizes the puppets. The free world now understands that we demand it because we are the free world. Because a free man differs from a slave in only one thing. A free man, even having got into slavery, will do his best to regain freedom, while a slave will only do his best to become a master. Well, just one thing to add to it. It was not desirable that pros should have strong political feelings. All that was required of them was a primitive patriotism which could be appealed to whenever it was necessary. Shameless propaganda of forced adoption of Ukrainian children has begun in the Russian Federation, says Institute the Study of War. Those are the schemes for forced adoption and deportation of children under the guise of leave and rehabilitation form the core of a massive depopulation campaign. Analysts at the American Institute for the Study of War suggest. Russian propaganda videos circulating on social networks claim that in 2022 alone, The Russians evacuated more than 150,000 children from the Donbas. According to the Institute, however, it is not clear where Russian sources got this figure from. Ukrainian officials previously estimated another number.
Russia deported more than 13,000 Ukrainian children. The Fourth Geneva Convention calls for the facilitation of renewal and contact and meeting of family members. But the goal of the Russian world is different: to kill millions of Ukrainians and to make their children Russian. Alexei Reznikov, Minister of Defense of Ukraine, on Twitter.
Also, the lunatic head of Chechnya, an official Kremlin's murderer and executioner, Ramzan Kadyrov, of course just couldn't keep his big mouth shut. He said that he wants difficult teenagers from Russian regions and the occupied parts of Ukraine to be brought to Chechnya for preventive work and military patriotic education and upbringing.
Requirement and use of children. Russia tried to use Ukrainian children to unknowingly provide information about the location of strategically important object through a mobile game. This is not just a dirty trick, it's a war crime. Alexei Reznikov, Minister of Defense of Ukraine, on Twitter.
You know, I really better stop explaining this thing, as it is plain enough to see what it is to anyone who has a heart and a mind. The intentional deportation of our children, the mass murder, the civilian infrastructure bombardment. There are many war crimes, and during this unjust criminal warfare against Ukraine, Russia committed them all. We will not forgive, nor will we forget. It was Henry Keane on the UATV channel explaining complex things in simple terms for you. The whole free world from Ukraine. Stay safe and tuned.